first warning did not arrive as fire or screams, it arrived as silence. A patrol flotilla at the rim of the Veloran expanse failed to report. Their transponders simply vanished from the Imperial ledger. The clerks marked it as a clerical error and moved on, because the Galactic Empire had ruled for 10,000 cycles and nothing truly new ever appeared at its borders. The stars were mapped, the species were catalogued, the wars were predicted, and victory was a matter of logistics and patience. When a second flotilla vanished, admirals frowned and analysts began to whisper. The void between known trade routes had been quiet for centuries, yet the data showed total loss with no debris trail, no radiation bloom, no ransom demand. The Empire prided itself on knowing every actor in the galaxy, every pirate clan, every nomad swarm, every emergent polity, and the conclusion repeated itself in the reports like a nervous tick. They were not in our records. The Emperor convened a minor council, not the full war synod, just enough to satisfy protocol. Scouts were dispatched with orders to observe and withdraw, and the Empire reassured itself that caution was wisdom, because unknowns could be studied, quantified, and absorbed. That was how it had always been done. The scouts returned only as fragmented telemetry, a wash of impossible vectors and collapsed probabilities, weapons signatures that did not match any known doctrine. The analysts tried to fit the data into existing models and failed. Engines burned cold and hot at once, mass shifted without inertia, and the scouts died before they could turn away. For the first time in generations, the Empire felt something close to unease, not fear, because fear was for lesser powers, but unease like a miscounted beat in a marching song. The Emperor ordered a task fleet to investigate, confident that mass would answer mystery. They did not know that the mystery had already measured them. The task fleet entered the expanse in perfect formation, banners bright, command carriers at the core, screens layered like petals of steel. They broadcast the standard challenge in 20 trade tongues, followed by the promise of leniency for immediate surrender. The Empire believed in announcements, because history taught that declarations ended conflicts before they began. The reply came as a narrowband burst, not a language but a timing sequence, pulses spaced with mathematical cruelty. The comm officers reported interference, and then nothing, because the pulse was not meant for ears, it was meant for systems. From the dark ahead, shapes emerged that the targeting computers struggled to hold, not sleek cruisers or brutal wedges, but angular silhouettes wrapped in fields that bent light. Their drives left no trails, and their weapons did not glow. The Empire fired first, because doctrine demanded it. Lances of coherent energy crossed the void and dispersed as if swallowed. Missile clouds vanished without detonating, and return fire arrived not as beams but as absence. Sections of ships simply ceased to exist, sliced away by effects that left no heat signature. Captains screamed for maneuver, but maneuver failed when inertia was rewritten. Ships drifted sideways through their own acceleration envelopes, colliding with escorts and tearing themselves apart. Command carriers attempted to bring their main guns to bear and were erased in careful pieces, bridge first, then reactors, then the rest. Within minutes, the task fleet was annihilated, not routed, not captured, but erased to a wreckage field so clean it insulted imperial sensibilities. The last transmission recorded a visual, a symbol painted across the void by active fields, a simple mark repeated on every hostile hull, a circle broken by a horizontal line. The analysts stared at the mark and felt the unease deepen, because symbols meant intent. News reached the capital despite censorship, because absence cannot be hidden forever. Dockworkers counted berths, families counted names, and merchants counted contracts that would never be fulfilled. The Emperor summoned the full synod, and the marble halls filled with voices raised too quickly. They argued doctrine and precedent, escalation and containment. Some claimed a rogue technocult, others a lost client species with forbidden relics. The archivists swore no such mark existed in any record. The Emperor demanded certainty and received none. A grand armada was assembled, because if mass failed once, it would not fail twice. 10 fleets, layered command, redundant control, countermeasures for every known exotic. The Empire would crush the unknown under certainty. As the armada translated, the panic crept into logistics. Factories worked beyond safety margins, crews were rushed through training, admirals competed for honor, and in the rush, the Empire forgot patience. The humans watched and waited, because patience was their oldest weapon. The armada met the humans at the edge of a gravity well that should have betrayed them, but the humans shaped gravity like clay. The battlefield unfolded according to a plan the Empire could not perceive. Decays drew fire that accomplished. The Empire collapsed inward before it collapsed outward, because once the armada was gone, there was nothing left to pretend. No reserve fleet hiding behind doctrine, no secret superweapon waiting in vaults of myth, only borders defended by names and memories, and names do not stop ships. Emergency councils became permanent, and permanent councils became arguments without end. Governors stopped paying tribute and began fortifying their own systems. Client species quietly withdrew cooperation, because the Empire's greatest strength had never been its fleets. It had been the belief that resistance was pointless, and that belief was dead. The humans did not advance in a tidal wave as the Empire feared. Instead, they appeared selectively, surgically, dismantling shipyards here, data vaults there, always leaving witnesses alive, always leaving the broken circle mark burned into sensor ghosts. They did not conquer worlds. They isolated them, cutting trade, cutting information, cutting hope. Captured recordings finally revealed their voices, calm, layered, speaking through translators that adapted in real time. And the message was the same everywhere. We are not your enemies by default, but you erased us from your records once, and we survived. You erased our colonies as statistical anomalies. You erased our losses as acceptable margins, and we learned. The historians pieced it together too late. A minor species encountered on the fringe centuries ago, classified as non-viable, exposed to proxy wars and experimental weapons, written off when their worlds went silent. The Empire had assumed extinction, because extinction was convenient. Humans had not gone extinct, they had gone dark. They rebuilt without broadcasting, expanded without flags, and studied the Empire the way predators study migratory herds, learning rhythms, weaknesses, and habits, turning every imperial certainty into a liability. When the Emperor finally ordered unconditional surrender talks, the humans responded not with threats, but with data, a complete map of imperial space more accurate than the Empire's own, casualty projections down to the individual world, and a final line that ended all argument: you do not need to fall, but you will never rule as you did. The Synod dissolved itself within the hour, governors declared autonomy, and the Galactic Empire became a historical term before the year was out. In academies that survived, new cadets studied the defeat as a warning, etched above the halls where records were kept, because the galaxy had learned its lesson at unimaginable cost. If they are not in your records, do not assume they are weak. Assume instead that they chose to be unseen, and that choice may be the most dangerous one of all.